And it goes a little something like.
In 2006, the city of Harar was designated as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The city was also granted the title Fourth Holy City of Islam. This was due to its unique history, traditions, and architecture that developed from both African and Islamic influences. It may then be surprising to know that historically, many residents of Harar frequently consumed alcohol and ignored the Islamic prohibition against it. In contrast, today there is an expectation of abstinence from alcohol in Harari Muslim communities. This video aims to shed light onto alcohol perception and behaviors throughout Harar's history and demonstrate how it was shaped by politics, Wahhabism, and social coercion. According to multiple authentic hadith and Quran verses, the consumption of alcohol and any intoxicant is prohibited. Drinking alcoholic beverages would thus be viewed as a sinful act by a Muslim. However, according to the Hanafi school of thought, khamar in Islamic scriptures refers to only fermented palm or grape juice, so it was forbidden, while other alcoholic beverages were permitted. They believed alcoholic beverages from non-grape sources could be consumed until before the point of intoxication. They believed it was drunkenness that is condemned in Islam. It was several centuries after Islam began that consensus united the Islamic legal community in asserting that all intoxicating drinks were to be banned, and not just those from palm or grapes. Despite the general consensus on the prohibition of alcohol in Islam, many Muslims consumed alcohol across the Islamic world from early to modern times. Muslim elites drank during the rule of the Umayyads, Abbasids, Islamic Spain, dynasties that ruled Egypt and Persia, Ottomans in West Asia, the Balkans and North Africa, the Safavids and the Qajars in Iran, and the Mughals in South Asia. The Muslims didn't just occasionally drink, they were observed to drink excessively. It is suggested that this was because of the illicit nature of the substance. Throughout the history of Muslim-ruled areas, the regulation of alcohol varied. It depended on the ruler and the political and economic conditions at the time. Because according to Islamic scripture, all alcohol and intoxicants are forbidden, any attempts at restriction was always in the form of complete bans. During the few alcohol bans in areas under the rule of Muslims, many caliphs and sultans continued to drink shamelessly with their friends. Also, the bans never worked for very long because the Muslims were usually able to obtain alcohol from non-Muslims. Debates around the Islamic prohibition of alcohol became more radical in the 19th century. This was due to new scientific knowledge of fermentation processes that revealed residual quantities of alcohol were present in foods and beverages. Before discussing Harar's relationship with alcohol, it is important to look at the history of alcohol in Ethiopia as a whole. Alcoholic beverages have a long history in Ethiopia and an important place in Ethiopian cultures. For example, Tej, honey wine, is an ancient Ethiopian alcoholic beverage. In the Harari language, Tej is called Teji. Tej is believed to be one of the oldest alcoholic beverages ever produced. The earliest mention of Ethiopians producing honey wine may be from an account by the ancient Greek historian Strabo, 63 BC to 24 AD. An inscription dated to the Aksumite Empire in the 3rd century AD mentions honey wine, called mez in the Ge'ez language, and beer in a list of items available in the royal court. The Aksumites also imported grape wine from Syria and Italy in the 1st century, and may have grown their own grapes and produced wine locally. Multiple accounts by visitors to Ethiopia in the 16th to 20th centuries describe Tej as popular among all people, but enjoyed mostly by the privileged in Ethiopia. This is because it was expensive. The poor would drink tala or tella, a lower quality beer made from barley. Royal Ethiopian courts would even have a servant dedicated to being in charge of Tej. Tej was brewed using various recipes, but usually included honey, water, and a fermentation process that included geisho leaves. The beverage used to be served in an animal's horn, and then later served in a barley, a flask-shaped vessel, similar to a gourd. Tej and other alcoholic beverages played a role in Ethiopian social life. Tej is enjoyed privately between friends and homes, enjoyed to celebrate weddings, shared in diplomatic meetings with foreigners, and even used as medicine. Honey wine and sorghum beer is used in some Nilotic communities in Ethiopia to anesthetize animals before a sacrifice, Wine made from dried raisins, while less popular than Teji, was used in Christian communion services. It wasn't only the non-Muslims who were drinking alcoholic beverages in Ethiopia. In Augustus B. Wilde's 1901 memoir, he documented a religious Muslim man named Saeed, who got drunk for the first time while drinking Teji. He vowed to never drink alcohol again. Despite the Islamic prohibition of alcohol, the Harari people, like many Muslims and Ethiopians, drank alcoholic beverages throughout history. The earliest evidence of alcohol production in the area may be from the 14th century Egyptian author Ibn Fadl Allah. He reported black grapes were grown in Ifat and other Ethiopian Muslim sultanates to the east. Black grapes in theory can be used to make red wine. Wine appears to have been permitted in the late 15th and early 16th century in Harar. Garad Aboyne is the first ruler of Harar who is recorded to have banned alcohol. He ruled Harar shortly before Sultan Abu Bakr's reign. In 1520, Sultan Abu Bakr moved the capital city of the Adal Sultanate from Dakar to Harar. He also legalized un-Islamic activities like drinking alcoholic beverages, gambling, and dancing with drums. The relaxed laws gave people more personal freedom to decide for themselves how to practice Islam, if at all. Quran teachers and sheikhs were unhappy with his decisions and rebuked him for his conduct. The conservative Muslims disliked how their interpretation of Sharia, Islamic law, was not enforced on everyone. They labeled the public lack of adherence to Islam as corruption. Abu Bakr was called an enemy of Allah and Muslims for his secular laws. The Harari population was divided between those who supported the secular laws and those who were outraged by them. In 1525, after years of tension, an intense civil war broke out between supporters of Sultan Abu Bakr and Imam Ahmed's fundamentalists in response to Abu Bakr's secular laws. Imam Ahmed's fundamentalists won the war and the Imam became the city's new leader. Imam Ahmed was very religious and lived dedicated to the Sharia. When he took control of Harar, he is said to have stabilized the city's internal disorders, which likely refers to reversing the secular laws that allowed un-Islamic activities, such as alcohol consumption. In the 1550s, Amir Nur became the ruler of Harar. Just like Imam Ahmad, he was intensely religious and abstained from every act forbidden by Islamic law. He also wanted the people of Harar to live strictly according to the Islamic law like he did. He prohibited un-Islamic activities among the noble class. In 1567, Amir Uthman, a former non-Muslim slave of Amir Nur, became the next ruler of Harar. In contrast to Amir Nur, Amir Uthman is described as neglecting his religious duties and was condemned for his irreligious behavior by his conservative opposition. After a nearly 40-year ban on alcohol, Amir Uthman allowed wine drinking in Harar and enacted other secular laws. His laws caused strong reactions from conservative Muslims and even fueled a rebellion that ended his reign. Nearly 300 years later in the 19th century, Harar's residents were still drinking. In 1855, Richard Burton reported widespread alcohol consumption in Harar. For example, he reported that Amir Ahmed ibn Abu Bakr's 40 to 50 guards would drink beer in Teji every evening after a long day's work. Burton observed the strong drinks made the drinkers more lively and engaged in rowdy conversations. Teji also acted as an aphrodisiac. Burton reported Teji was a very popular drink in Harar, claiming all men, pagans, sages, priests, and rulers drank it. Burton also observed Harari women chewing tobacco and drinking beer. Richard Burton documents how Teji was made in Harar. Step 1. Honey is dissolved in about 15 parts of hot water in a vessel. Step 2. Honey is strained and fermented for 7 days with the bark of a tree called kudida. Step 3. To speed up the fermentation process, the vessel is placed near a fire. In addition to the honey wine's popularity among locals, it was also highly praised by travelers. Richard Burton describes the way in which the Harari drank as freely, even in the presence of the ulama, Islamic scholars, and the pilgrims. This suggests a lack of social stigma regarding alcohol consumption in Harar. The drinking was common, public, and appears to be done without shame. Another account of alcohol consumption in Harar is found in a book published in 1901. The author recorded women working at a brewery in Harar brewed Teji with 5 parts water, a much higher concentration than Burton describes. He echoes the high status of Teji described by previous foreigners, stating it as the highest bliss of some Abyssinians and one of the main objectives of their existence. In 1936, during the Italian occupation of Ethiopia, Mussolini's fascist regime opened bars next to holy sites in Harar. In 1974, it was reported that some Harari people drank barley beer, called Gohoy, and honey wine, though milk, tea, and coffee were the beverages that were consumed the most. As part of a traditional Harari wedding, premarital celebrations called tunsis were held. These celebrations were documented in 1953 and 1974. In 1953, these celebrations began with the bride and her friends roaming around the city, which served as an invitation to single young men in her neighborhood to the event. Single young women from the groom and bride's families were also invited. The invitation usually consisted of the following words: "Mr. So-and-so orders you to crush hops." Crushing hops is part of the beer brewing process. This demonstrates how the production of beer was once common knowledge in the Harari community. The people used to brew and drink beer during the tunsis celebrations. These celebrations were held for 2 nights at the groom's family home and 3 nights at the bride's family home before the wedding night. The parties would start at around 10 p.m. with the beating of drums and singing. Weddings were the only socially accepted opportunities for unmarried Harari men and women to dance together. The boys would sing songs praising the bride, groom, their parents, relatives, and friends. The parties are joyous events that last all night, sometimes ending when the sun rises. During the night, the unmarried boys and girls in attendance have the opportunity to mingle and potentially engage in sexual activities. A verse that is sung by the men is, "The day comes before I am satisfied." The conversation about alcohol in Harar would not be complete without a discussion on the influence of Wahhabism. Wahhabism is a strict and puritanical sect of Islam that developed in the 18th century in modern-day Saudi Arabia. The sect advocates for a literal interpretation of the Quran and enforces rigorous behaviors and belief standards among its followers. The radical ideology considers images, saints, shrines, festivals, music, dance, and socializing as distractions from true piety. The literal interpretation of the Quran employed by Wahhabism causes Muslims to interpret violent verses as commands to fight non-Muslims simply for not believing in Islam. Historically, the Saudis have been the most persistent source of support for global jihad by spreading Wahhabism and giving financial support for their violent terrorist attacks. According to Wahhabism, anyone who deviates from its teachings, including other Muslims with differing practices, are branded as infidels and deserving of severe punishments for such transgressions. Wahhabism is aligned with the Hanbali school of Islamic thought. Starting from the 18th century, Muhammad ibn Abd al-Wahhab, the founder of Wahhabism, strictly prohibited alcohol and other intoxicants in Arabia. However, people continued to drink. This led to Muhammad punishing the drinkers by shaving their beards or imposing fines. In 1932, when Saudi Arabia was founded, the Wahhabi-influenced prohibition of alcohol continued in the new nation. The government tried to enforce the ban in the main cities of the Hijaz. In 1952, after an incident where King Abdulaziz's son, Prince Mashari, was drunk and used a shotgun to kill a British vice-consul Cyril Osman in Jeddah, the sale of alcohol was strictly banned. The strict legal ban resulted in it being dangerous to be seen drinking alcohol in public in certain environments. Saudi residents who do wish to drink do so privately to avoid causing a public scandal. Thus, in Saudi Arabia, a strict ban on alcohol never stopped all people from drinking. Instead, it resulted in social stigma against drinkers, causing them to hide their drinking, a high rate of alcohol-induced car accidents, and the smuggling of alcoholic beverages into the country. Wahhabism soon made its way to Harar. In the mid-1920s, a group of 60 Harari and Yemeni traders founded the Firmatch, or the Signatories in English. This was an association of Harari residents concerned with the rights and well-being of the Harari population. The leader of the group was Haj Abu Bakr Ayun. For over 30 years between 1928 to 1970, the group held meetings to determine how to regulate behaviors of the Harari community they found inappropriate. They blamed costly traditional Harari funeral and wedding customs for impoverishing the masses and called for abiding by stricter orthodoxy. The Firmatch presented a document to the Harari community to reform Harari culture. The document listed steps to improve the finances of the community and cease cultural practices they deemed harmful. In 1926, the group developed into the Jamia al-Wataniya al-Kariya, or Watani for short. The group founded the first modern Islamic Arabic school in Harar. They saw the school as an Islamic Harari national revival. Motivated by political interests, the Italian fascists during the Ethiopian invasion, which lasted from 1936 to 1941, also pushed towards a more conservative Islam in Harar. The Italians subsidized the Hajj pilgrimage to Saudi Arabia for Ethiopian Muslims. Because of this, many Harari people went to Saudi Arabia and became influenced by Wahhabism. For example, a group of Harari pilgrims who traveled with the help of the Italians met a Harari who lived in Saudi Arabia named Haji Yusuf Abd al-Rahman. He studied Wahhabism in Mecca and Medina between 1928 to 1938 after traveling there with his parents. He became an Islamic school teacher, teaching Wahhabism at Madrasat Dar al-Aitam. Before the occupation in 1935, Yusuf also met another Harari pilgrim, Ibrahim Hassan. Ibrahim was a member of Firmatch and a teacher at its school. Ibrahim was a vocal critic of the Ethiopian Empire. He viewed the empire as committing crimes against Islam and wrote an article in Medina that was published in an Arab journal. Ibrahim and Yusuf developed a close friendship. By 1941, after the occupation ended, the Harari people in Saudi had returned to Harar. Haji Yusuf wanted to revive Islam and bring political Islamism to the city. However, a local, Haji Umar Muhammad Abd al-Rahman, told him the Harari people were divided, too concerned with their own lives, and had their own version of Islam that they were accustomed to following. This Islam was based on the Sufi principle of tawassul and consisted of the visitation of graves and shrines, ziyarah, and rituals focused on the remembrance of God, zikr. In 1936, a Syrian journalist named Taysir Zabian al-Kailani visited Harar. He documented the people's Islamic practice in his book he published the following year. In Zabian's perspective, Islam in Harar during the Italian occupation was shallow, full of superstition and ignorance, and contained too many Sufi influences. Haji Yusuf gathered support of other Islamists who wanted to create an Islamic state with Somalia. He was essentially trying to recreate the 16th century Adal Sultanate and separate it from Ethiopia. They declared the establishment of a National Islamic Association al-Jamia, al-Wataniya al-Islamiyya, or al-Watani for short, to replace the old, strictly Orthodox Islamic Welfare Association, Jamia al-Wataniya al-Kariya. The Welfare Association school then started to teach Wahhabi Islam. This radical version of Islam preached against the version of Islam commonly followed by residents of Harar. For example, Hajj Ibrahim Hassan told his students their superstitions and veneration of saints such as Sheikh Abadir was putting them at risk of committing the serious Islamic sin of shirk. Instead of venerating Sheikh Abadir, the school encouraged militant Islam by portraying Imam Ahmad ibn Ibrahim as a positive role model. The Wahhabi school taught the harmful and divisive narrative that the Imam was a righteous holy warrior who united all Muslims around Harar and destroyed Christian Ethiopia. In reality, Ahmad was a ruthless terrorist who killed thousands of non-Muslim civilians by beheading when they didn't agree to convert to Islam, destroyed ancient artwork in churches, pillaged through towns and enslaved women and children. The Wahhabi ideology clashed with Harar's traditional version of Islam that was a pragmatic mixture of Sunni moderate orthodoxy and Sufism. Unlike Wahhabism, Islam in Harar was traditionally flexible and capable of coexisting peacefully with other cultures. In the 1930s, most Muslims in Ethiopia lived according to popular Islamic customs and rituals and had little knowledge of Arabic. The majority of residents in Harar were not inclined to adopt the strict orthodoxy of Wahhabism. The introduction of Wahhabism in Harar was challenged by Sheikh Abdallah ibn Muhammad ibn Yusuf al-Harari, who was a Sufi member of the Qadariyah at the time. Muslims in Harar were split throughout the 1930s and 1940s. On one side was the new Wahhabi ideology that rejected traditional practices, glorified the destructive offensive jihad of the 16th century, and advocated rejection of the government and forming an Islamic state. On the other side were Muslims who practiced a traditional version of Islam, supported peaceful Muslim-Christian collaboration, and accepted their integration as citizens of Ethiopia. In 1948, the Islamist movement ended when the Ethiopian government sentenced 81 members of Watani to exile and took control of its Wahhabi school. However, Wahhabism didn't disappear from Harar in 1948. Haji Yusuf worked closely with the Ethiopian government and even supervised the first official translation of the Quran into Amharic, which was published in 1961. He left Ethiopia in 1974 when the Derg regime took control of the country. Also, the strictly orthodox Firmach group, who became influenced by Wahhabism, continued to hold meetings until 1970. Soon after the Watani movement collapsed, a similar political movement called Amashna developed in the 1950s. People involved in this movement started a new cultural ceremony called Wirshato in 1965 or 1966. This was accomplished by various groups of Harari men, Jama'ah, who gathered together at the Abdal burial site. The ceremony occurs from the 1st to the 9th day of the Islamic calendar's first month, Muharram. In the ceremony, gourds are smashed to symbolically represent ending bad habits such as alcohol consumption. The aim is to encourage the Harari people to stop drinking alcoholic beverages if they do, or to not start if they don't. The ceremony is a joyous occasion for young boys. They run around the city holding sticks and sing ceremonial songs. The boys travel to many homes in the city to obtain gourds. In the song, the gourds are described as being filled with alcoholic beverages. The boys smash the gourds with their sticks and then make toys out of the broken pieces to symbolize the benefits that can be obtained by breaking bad habits. Some of the Wirshato song's lyrics express desires for the Harari community for the new year ahead, blessings for Islam and Muslims, birth to sons by newlywed Harari women so they can grow up to become soldiers and fight in war, death by beheading to those who commit evil deeds, such as drinking alcohol, destruction of the munafiq, whom in Islam are people who pretend to be Muslim but aren't, and other enemies. These messages are consistent with the tenets of Wahhabism, as it encourages all Muslims to strictly adhere to the Islamic prohibition of alcohol, encourages war, and it declares those who do drink as not truly Muslims who should be killed. Today, Wirshato is no longer associated with its Wahhabism roots. Instead, it is viewed as a cultural ceremony that is celebrated by all Harari people. The Firmach decided to threaten to expel any Harari from their Afocha, which is a social support association, if they participated in Tunsis. Tunsis was one of their concerns because they deemed the celebrations expensive and socially unacceptable. To those who followed strict interpretations of Islam, such as Wahhabism, the mingling, dancing, potential for sexual activity, and alcohol consumption by unmarried men and women during the all-night parties would be deemed Islamically forbidden. Also, the men would sometimes fight at the events, causing severe injuries. The cause of the fights were thought to be uninvited attendees and people drinking alcohol. This gave the group even more reason to ban the celebrations. Every married Harari joined in a focha. The groups have a high degree of importance in Harari social life, even today. To expel one from this group would be a devastating loss and could negatively impact one's well-being. Despite the threat, the Tunsis ban was difficult to enforce onto the population. The singing of love songs during the celebrations were much valued by Harari mothers and single men and women. They saw it as an opportunity for young people to find a potential spouse. To keep the celebrations alive, a group of single young men came up with their own solution. They decided to police the celebrations and ban uninvited guests and those who were drinking alcohol. The social policing of the celebrations was not enough to keep them alive. In 1974, it was reported that only some Harari families continued the parties. The celebrations were discouraged because it granted a sexual license between unmarried individuals. In 1980, it was reported that Tunsis continued but was highly condemned by the older generation because of the mingling between the sexes. Today, tunsis is rarely included as part of modern Harari weddings. Despite the 20th century push towards abstinence from alcohol in Harar, in 1984, the Derg regime opened up the first modern brewery in Harar. In 2011, the Dutch brewing company Heineken bought the state-owned Harar and Bedelay breweries for a combined total of $163 million. The Harar brewery manufactures a beer called Harar beer. The brewery also produces Sofi malt, Harar Sofi, as a non-alcoholic beverage to appeal to the abstinent Muslim population. For most Harari Muslims, alcohol consumption is legally permitted in the countries they live in. However, due to the history of alcohol prohibition described in this video, alcohol consumption remains a taboo within the Harari community. A 2022 study conducted in Harar revealed only 4.5% of Muslims in the city self-reportedly drank alcohol. In addition, in recent years, modern science has revealed many harmful effects of alcohol on human health. Today, the majority of the Harari Muslim population does not consume alcoholic beverages publicly, nor is alcohol a part of social events like weddings anymore. In conclusion, despite Harar's popular title as a holy city, throughout its history the residents produced and consumed alcohol, just like the rest of Ethiopia and the Muslim world. Commands to abstain from alcohol in Islamic scripture were followed by the strictly devout and ignored by the common people. Alcoholic beverages have a long history in Ethiopia. Thousands of years ago, Teji may have been the first alcoholic beverage ever produced. Honey wine, grape wine, raisin wine, and beer serve many functions in Ethiopian cultures. In Harar, alcohol was publicly tolerated or prohibited depending on whether the city's leader imposed Sharia or ruled secular. The 16th century prohibitions on alcohol were declared by fundamentalist jihadi rulers Garad Aboyne, Imam Ahmad, and Amir Nur. Before Harar's 1887 incorporation into Ethiopia, alcoholic consumption was a normal part of the city's society. Honey wine and beer were commonly made and enjoyed at informal social gatherings and wedding celebrations. After Harar fell to the Christian Ethiopian Empire in 1887, the city could no longer be ruled by Islamic law. Alcohol consumption was legal under the Christian Ethiopian Empire. Local Wahhabi-influenced political movements such as Firmach and Amashna sought to pressure Muslims into conforming to the Islamic prohibition on alcohol. The groups created a new cultural ceremony called Wirshato and strongly condemned an existing one, tunsis. This greatly reduced drinking alcohol in public, ending Harar's centuries-old drinking culture. Today, there is stigma associated with drinking in the Harari Muslim community and low levels of self-reported consumption. While historically, the creation, consumption, and distribution of alcoholic beverages was dominated by local Harari people, today, the vast majority have excluded themselves completely from this industry. A modern multi-million-dollar brewery now operates in Harar and is owned by a foreign company. The Harari people not only lost their appetite for alcohol, but the ancient art and skill of wine making and beer brewing of their ancestors too.